So this idea of support, I keep coming back to it in themes, approaching it from different ways. And one of the things that I have been over the years unraveling is when I feel truly supported. And of course, that can only really come from me acknowledging all the support that's being offered to me in any moment or given time. Because there's always support out there. Just are we tuning into the surface of support that's offering us the kind of support that we need in that moment? Because there's a lot of different ways of support. Some are pleasing and pleasant, and some of them are not so pleasant, but there are different ways of support. So unraveling my relationship with support has been an interesting journey. And so what does that mean to be supported? And does it mean that my environment is following a script that says, okay, this is when I'm supported. If you do this or this happens, then I feel supported? Or is support something else that we can explore and unravel? And one of the questions that over the years has arisen for me is, what does it even look like to be supported? I mean, on one hand, the earth is supporting us 24/7. So for me to ever arrogantly say I'm not supported is just a bald-faced lie, because I'm not flying off the planet, you know. It's like, so I have support, earthly support 24/7. And if I remind myself of that, then I'm never without some pathway to finding what support is. So then it's up to me to get clearer in myself. Yeah. It's up to me to get clearer in myself about what am I willing to receive the support that's being offered? And maybe some of the support that's being offered isn't what I really want at that time. It's like, I don't want it that way. I want it a different way. And then there's my picture. So there's that whole question around support. And then the other one that I feel is really fascinating to unpack, because we've talked about, being our best selves. That's a big thing, that's a vernacular out there now about how do I become my best self? Well, you're not. You're never going to become your best self because you're already your best self. I mean, you're already the full package. You're already your best self right now. So when we start to say, oh, I wasn't my best self, can we remove that languaging from our saying it out, to make that verbal, powerful declaration is declaring something very interesting. It's really declaring that I'm not enough. It's really declaring that I don't really believe that I'm perfect. It's really declaring a lot of things. I mean, it can also be an inspiration to say, okay, I want to strive. I mean, there's reasons where we would use it or where we wouldn't, but it becomes such a part of our yoga, self-help, healing vernacular about how do I become my best self? What is that getting to be my best self? Because I am my best self. And if I can take the pictures off of what that looks like, then and receive the self that I am and move from there, all the layers, that opens up a different way of being in the world. But let's just go back to best self and say, when I'm feeling my best, because there's times I go like, oh my God, I'm not really liking me right now. And that's because there's just ways I don't like to be in the world. I don't like to be judgy. I don't like to be crabby, things like that. But I get used to it. I get used to my own judginess. I get used to my own crabbiness. I get used to my own whatever I amness. But the question about it's this best self thing. And I started with the body because that can be such a great way of understanding some of the subtleties of the things that aren't physical in us. So going back to the body, when I'm all that support that we did, and then I said, okay, and now how do you feel I'm thinking, I didn't want to say, are you your best self? But then this idea of maybe I feel freer, maybe I feel lighter, maybe I feel something better than I did before. And then when we start to feel that, do we feel this need or something to perform, like this performative aspect of best self? Do I need to start to glow now? Do I need to start to shine now? Do I need to start to show my best self instead of just be what I am in that moment? And then what does that step of the performative aspect do to my relationship to support? Does it disengage me from support? Do I feel like now I have to grow bigger than my support? Do I want to say I don't need support? I mean, all these things come up. So anyway, I think that's some food for thought right there. What do y'all think?
The like you are your best self teaching is something that's like really, really helpful to me sometimes, because there's a lot of pressure that I put on myself to do things like better, or overestimating my capacity, which none of us probably know what that's like. Like, just like this sort of constant overestimation, which is in some ways rooted in like a deep sort of self-confidence, right? But I think it's also about how we are like showing up for others, and expectations, which are not quite the same thing as like confident about one's ability. So I like definitely oscillate in that space a lot. But I mean, I typed it in the chat, and like something when you were talking that really hit me was this idea of having earthly support 24/7. Like that's so real. That's one of those moments where like you're so focused on a thing and you're feeling so unsupported, or you're feeling so unheld or so alone, but all you need to do is like look up, and then there's actually this enormous amount of support. That's like a really powerful reminder. I was like, I need to put that on a mug. Like, that's a good one. And I just broke my favorite coffee mug, so it's like it could be time.
I know you will put it on a mug.
I did. I had this wonderful coffee mug with a beautiful illustration of a tiny chipmunk that is also a wizard. And that it was like a little wizard chipmunk. And that was my coffee mug. And I knocked it off the bench yesterday. I had finished my coffee already, but the little chipmunk wizard mug is very, very broken. So anyway, yeah, I need a new mug, but
I was thinking about this podcast I was listening to yesterday. The topic was about shame. And just one of the takeaways there for me was how shame is one of those few emotions we feel that is externally driven. Like you need an other or an external somebody, something to make you feel the shame. So like shame comes about when you are actually in another person's shoes and imagining, whether true or not, that that person or whoever is judging you for something. And I was just connecting that with your topic of conversation, Jean, on being your best self. And I think that you can never be your best self when you are being driven by emotions like shame. So then it started compelling me to think about parsing out that definition of best self a little bit more, because I feel like a lot of times best self is defined, whether we're thinking about it consciously or not, by what others think of us, others like ideals and expectations and like imagery of like, oh, what is Brandy like at her best self? And so they might have a vision, or you might even imagine that they have a vision of you at your best self, and then you feel I don't know, like let down um, or bummed out, whatever that is when you're not kind of meeting that ideal. So I don't know. I really like that you brought that up because now it's making me think about what does my best self look like, truly, truly to myself. And maybe some of those images don't always look that beautiful and that ideal, I guess. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but it's making me think.
I'll just add, I think for me, we were going through the meditation and those questions, what was coming up for me is that idea of best felt very external. It was somebody else was creating that. And so the word that kept coming up for me was my authentic self, which was, not about being my best self, but being my true self, like who am I really? And that's a really interesting journey because when we were going through the meditation and you were asking about how do you feel supported, this was like a really sort of deep process and work that I had to do to go back to get to that place that like really inside, I have the support in me. It's all there. But it was sort of, we go through life and we become disconnected from ourselves. We become disconnected from those parts of ourselves through, various things in life, various traumas. And so this idea of this being the best was a very external version. And so it was really about coming back to me, to this part of me, this authentic part of me, and knowing that I'm always supported. I'm always being supported by sort of myself, right? But my greater self, the soul part of yourself, the larger part of your consciousness. But that was a journey to kind of come back and figure that out. And so when we were going through all of that, it was the sense of I'm supported by, I have all the support. It's there. It's not this sort of external thing. And then it's really about being authentic. It's not the best. It's about being, who I am at this moment in my life. And the color that was coming up for me was indigo, the bluish purple. Very sort of healing, very sort of just calming and nourishing. The reds and the oranges and the yellows try to seep in, but I wasn't feeling that today. So it was interesting to explore that.
The idea of best self is interesting, authentic self, all that. And that external, what that is, like what is that thing that we as humans are seeking from the outside? And what would that look like? And if we don't get the support in the way that we have requested it on the platter that we wanted it, in the package that we wanted it to come in, then maybe we don't feel, then we interpret that it didn't come a certain way. And we interpret that as we're not being supported, possibly. When actually we're, like I said, we're always supported 24/7. So if we can open up our vision, our capacity to acknowledge that no matter what's coming, no matter what it is, it's support. It doesn't have to be pleasant. And the universe really is answering our prayers in every moment. I believe that. I believe that really, really deeply. So, and it may not look like what we want it to look like then. They may never look like that picture. But we as the universe, because we've been through the space thing, so we're the universe. We as the universe really know what we really, really want. And if we have a deep driving desire, which is more of a vikalpa versus a sankalpa, something that's really against, something that's more negative, so to speak, then it's because of our deepest, deepest sankalpa of, let's just use the words authentic self. It's that's causing a light to get shined more and more on that vikalpa, that deepest driving desire. So it can shine a light on that to say, this is one of those things that's keeping you from, this is one of those things that's maybe feeding into my need to perform, or feeding in my need to please, or feeding in my need to be my best self, or whatever that is, with an external standard. So it's really coming from that deeper sense, the deepest sense of our being is the one that's driving even all of our vikalpas. We say, who's driving the bus of you? Well, your deepest thing is driving the bus of you, but we get distracted on this road and we start to think, oh, that's not me. That's like, I sound like my parents, or that's not this, I sound like a such and such, or I'm just parroting this, or oh my God, where did that come from? Blah, blah, blah. Because it's all part of our internalness. It's all part of the journey, the distractions, which give us a bigger point of view. If we just went from point A to B, we kind of miss some of the scenery. So is stopping to see the scenery a distraction? Well, it depends on how bad you need to get to B. Like if you got to get to B really quickly, then yeah, if you got, for example, you've got a job interview. Well, then you probably want to get from A to B to make sure you prepare for B. And that's probably not the time, to do a lot of scenery. But if you do scenery, maybe what you see in that scenery is going to help you be better when you get to B. So there's not one correct path. There's not one, like this is when we go from A to B, and this is when we do scenery. So even that isn't set. That's why we're always doing the perfect thing. Whether we get to B in a timely manner, we're going to get to B at some point. But then B might not be what we are even wanting by then. Sometimes the journey that got us to B, that goal, that thing that we've been seeking, that thing that we've been striving for, that something, by the time we get there, we've pretty much grown past it most of the time. Which is why I think it's important for us to be able to focus on B, understand the scenery, but also know that the thing that we're seeking isn't the end point. Because we only have end points because we live in a dual perspective, and it's hardwired into us because we have a body that has our body with, it doesn't even have a beginning, middle, and end, our body. If we think about it. But we do have a dual frame of mind, and we perceive things from segments off of a timeline, often because of how we're wired in the world. But yeah, we're I can't even use the body thing now. We're eternal. This dust, this stardust, this stuff is, and then let's just say that we all hit this place, all of it. It's this place of self-realization, and we've gotten to B, and B's, we're all feeling our divinity, and B's like we're all that, and and just there's no judgment anymore. Well, now we moved on to the next chakra. So who knows what now the new rules are? But it's not going to be what we're doing here. It's not going to be duality. We will have done that already. We've got to be, and now we have to start again with a whole new language, a whole new way of being. The support to me is really an interesting topic. One of the journeys for me is to feel supported by myself, inside of myself, feeling like like what Alicia was talking about is like I have all my tools inside of me, which is totally true. But another question that comes up, and as a teacher, and you are all teachers, that idea of where does it become this idea of supporting myself? Where's that place between really feeling like I'm supporting myself and then me, I don't even, this is not the language. I'll just say it and then I'll try to back engineer it or something because it's not exactly what it's not what this is going to sound like maybe. But this idea of supporting self, when does that become something that actually is more of a protective device and is actually leading me into more disconnect? That's why I brought up that idea of when I allow myself to receive that support, then does that support provide me support to be bigger and to be more okay with what's around me? Or is it I need to feel supported, but no one else can support me but me right now, so I need to go into my own little cave? And I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but when does it become the bubble? When does that membrane get too hard?
So I don't, this I had a thought coming up, which may sort of weave its way into this question you're asking now. But when I think of support, sometimes that also is in the form of obstacles or challenges. And I've had a set of rune stones since in my early 20s, and I remember I'd pull these stones a lot, and it'd say, challenges, or these challenging can't talk. This challenge happening in your life right now is really about growth, and you're like, I don't understand what this means, and so it's over time after this, going through this, it's like sometimes that support comes in the form of something that's really jarring, a loss of a job, a person, like something really big is this support from the universe, which feels very contrary, very opposite. But yet it's just sort of, forcing you to grow. It's forcing you to have to look at something that sometimes maybe you weren't seeing in the more subtle ways. And so I think when I think about that support isn't always this warm, comfy blanket, right? This idea of that comfort, that sometimes it's really harsh. In those moments, do we sort of take it and see it for what it is, or do we sort of, kind of come back into our shell? And that's maybe some of what you're getting at, Jean, is are we taking these opportunities and letting them help us grow and expand? Or are we contracting in? And probably at times we're doing both, because we need to contract sometimes to expand. But that's what was coming up for me when we were talking about this idea of support, that it's not always as warm and cozy as we might like it to be.
Yeah, like that tough love factor, right? Support is sometimes the denial of the expectations or the cutting away of the things that are weighing us down, which is like counterintuitive. Like support, it's like all about like connection and holding, but support also is the thing that cuts away that which is holding us back, which is lovely wordplay.
I do feel there's these occasional flashes when I sit in meditation or in silence of me sensing being, I guess in Alicia's words, my authentic self. And that authentic self has everything that I need. And sometimes it gets to the point where when I can like really sense it, it like overwhelms me. Like it really moves me to tears. I don't know if you all ever, maybe you respond in a different way, but I just want to, yeah, I don't know. I can't even convey those moments in words because they're just, they're, they just take over my entire being.
I love that so much, Brandy. I think it's like this part of ourselves that's this pure sort of love. It's like this pure light, and it's a part of ourselves that we maybe don't really share with the world for various reasons. And so when you're there and you're touching it, it is, it's like that pure sense of like, for me, that love is what comes up. And it's probably what we all want, right? We all seek in various ways. We all are looking for, and then when you see it in yourself, it's this very sort of overwhelming, like, wow, it's right here, and it's scary, and it's not something we want to share, you know. And for me, when I sort of did a lot of work on that, it was when I finally got to that point, it was that 4-year-old girl who was still stuck there after my parents told me they were getting divorced. And like, that's where she stayed for years, because that was such a traumatic experience in my life, the way that whole thing was handled, that it was, I wound up being these two people, right? The person I showed to the outside world, and then this person inside. And that person inside, you know, she was hidden, she was guarded, but yet she was there all these years. And so when I started to finally break down those walls and reconnect and come back, I mean, it was like, it was overwhelming. I mean, it was a very overwhelming experience. But that, you know, she was still there. And it's like you're going through those whole things that you went through. For me, when I was 4, like reliving all these things. And so there's been a lot of healing and coming back. But that to me is like the soul part, like the pure part of us that continues on and lives. And it's powerful and overwhelming for sure. But it's so beautiful that you're connecting with that too. Yeah.
So we connect with that part, and then what? Right? It's like, there we go. I connected with that part, and now I'm in the world. And I can lead, and when I'm really leading from that part, the world is a very different place for me. And how long can we stay in that place? Like for me, it's just really non-judgmental and see the perfection of everything. Everything's beautiful. Like the song says, everything's beautiful in its own way, blah, blah, blah. The whole thing. And even the quote ugliness of humanity is beautiful. All that process looks, it's all perfect. I mean, really, really, that's the perspective for me. So I can tell when I'm not there by how I see the world. I can tell when I'm not in that as pure space of connection, or that when I can tell when I've closed myself off from that by whatever is happening in my life, distractions, judgments, work, blah, 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 physical pain, emotional pain, mental pain, spiritual pain, all that. So I can tell when I've reduced the valve of that presence by how I see the world and how I experience my own experience. Because just because I'm in that space doesn't mean I'm not going to get sick or you stub my toe or go bankrupt or whatever happens to people. We can still be in that space And our perception of it will be very different if we're in that space. And then I think for me, one of the things to pay attention to is, and how much am I trying to make my external world support, behave in such a way that I can delude myself that I'm in that space. You know, like if everything else would just happen this way, it would prove to me that I'm in that space. But really, the bottom line is if I'm wanting the external world to be different, I'm not in that space. I don't care how much of my truth I'm speaking. If I need something else from somebody to be different, then I'm not there. If I feel like I need to be different, I'm not there. Again, I say these things and I can just feel the humanness and the duality of the words. And it's not all like those were such declarative statements and so black and white and hard lines in the sand, but there's just so much playroom in what I just said. Just yeah. Tempo comes up sometimes for me, I'm a fast person. I like speed. I like things to go quickly. I'm, I'm boom, 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 boom. Let's get it done. Let's do more. So that's been my MO for many years. And so playing with the idea of tempo has been a cool little exploration for me. That's why I said in the beginning meditation about bringing the support in, not too fast, not too slow. Because sometimes all the support can rush in. It could actually cause like some sort of a physical, mental, or emotional spasm, like, wait, too fast. Though I can't receive all that support, So to acknowledge the capacity to receive the overwhelming amount of support that's being bestowed on us 24/7 also is to how do I bring that support in? Like if you have a cramp or a spasm, you just don't go and support it because it'll just make it cramp fat more, You don't go. So how do you like get the things around you to get soft enough, relaxed, and let that membrane be a little bit more permeable so that support can seep in? And isn't that support just a way of saying your authentic self is enough? The way you are right now? And that physical, mental, or emotional spasm or physical spasm might be just be saying, change the tempo. Change my point of view. Maybe I need to go faster. Maybe going slower would be helpful. If I need to go faster, it's probably because I'm dragging my feet, resisting something. If I need to go slower, it's probably because I'm trying to ignore something or get through something, or I'm out of present moment, but because I got to get to B. And I'm fixated on what B is. So this idea of tempo and support was my inspiration for today, because I think it's been pretty groovy. You've all inspired me today. Anyone have anything else before we wrap up?
We just ponder, Jean. It's so much is there. Sometimes you just take time to process. When you're like, is there anything else? I'm like, oh my God, there's so much, but but I just have to let it sit.
Thanks for saying that, Alicia. I think one thing I'm working on in my teachings is to allow more time just to let it be in the space and just be in the space together.
I think what happened, it's things start to come up, right? You have these stirrings, but you don't know how to talk about it because it's probably in a way that you're like, I've never really thought about that. I've never talked about it that way. And so I sometimes I feel, that way. It's like, you're like, yes, but I never connected those. And so, yeah, having those times of silence to allow it to sort of bubble up and then be able to share it.
All right, my loves. Let's just let that ride. I love you all so much.
Love you too, Jean.
Have a great rest of your until next time and all that.
Love you, Jean. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks, Brandy.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Should I stay on this call, Jean, for our?
No, let's move to the next.
Okay.